Okay, welcome all in the next lecture of SQL. So in today, we'll start with writing the subqueries. So what is a subqueries? First of all, we'll talk about that. So a subquery is nothing but a select statement embedded in a clause of another SQL statement. That's called a subquery. Query under the query is called a subquery. Very simple to understand. Now, what is the use of subquery? So first of all, before starting with the subquery, let's discuss about the different types of subqueries. So let's go here. So first we have is called a single, single row subquery. I'll write SQ here. That is a subquery. Second is a multi-row subquery. Simple. And third is called as a correlated subquery. So correlated subquery. Correlated correlated subquery. Okay, so we have a single subquery, single row subquery, multi-row subquery, and correlated subquery. So first we'll talk about a simple subquery and correlated. Simple here. So what's a single row subquery? The name is given based on the result what returned by the subquery. According to that, that subquery is considered what type of subquery is that. Single row subquery returns a single row and multi-row subquery returns the multiple rows. So technically we have these two. Okay, so we'll talk about the correlated afterwards. So technically we have these two. But for understanding purpose, you must be knowing two more categories of this. That is a single value subquery and multi-value subquery. Single value subquery, multi-value subquery. So first we'll discuss about these four. What is the single value? What is the multi-value? What is the single row? What is a multi-row? Okay, so just keep this in mind. Let's say we'll start with our simple table. We'll say select star from Bollywood. Okay, so when I say the select star from Bollywood, can I say it's a simple query? There is no subquery involved in this. Now subquery simply means what? You write another query in any of the clause of this query. You write subquery in any of the clause of this subquery. So whenever we write the subquery, subquery result will be the same, but according to the clause you have chosen the subquery, result will be treated. Simple. Now for an example, let's see. In select, what we write? Columns. Simple. In where, what do we write? So after the select, we use a from. In the from, what we write? We write a source or call it as a table. Simple. And in where, we write a condition. Simple here. So in select, we use a column. In from, we use a table. In where, we use a condition. So the result of subquery will also be treated according to the clause you are choosing where you have returned the subquery. Simple here. Let's say, understand with an example properly here. When I'm writing here select, and here I'm writing a subquery. Subquery has to be written in the parenthesis. So I'm writing a subquery select problem select name from Bollywood where ID equal to 9. Simple. So I have written select, and instead of writing a column, we have written a query. Then I say here, we can give the alias to the column. So you can give an alias to this query as well. Okay, so here we'll give the column name as a name from body. Now what will be the result? Now result will be whenever we write a subquery, one rule applied, that is initially subquery execute, pass the value to its outer query, and the outer query take that value according to the clause where you have been chosen. If this get executed first, what will be the result? Sanju. Now Sanju will be taken as a value for column. Now in the column, we have already discussed that there are two types of columns. One is actual column and one is a literal. So here it cannot be the actual column, so it will be the literal. So this will be returned here. So what will be the result? This value will be used for entire table. So we have 15 rows here. So Sanju will be printed for 15 times. Sanju, 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 Sanju. Clear here? Now, here I have used a where ID equal to 9. If I remove this, what do you think? What will be the result? Now it will return an error because this query is going to return a multiple names, or you can say the multiple rows. But a column cannot have a multiple value. And that's the reason that this query will become invalid. Now if I execute, we got an error. Single row subquery returns more than one row. Simple. So what you have to take in mind, that whenever you're writing a subquery, you should be very clear that where you are using the subquery. And according to that clause, you have to choose a subquery, whether it's a single row, multi-row, single value, or a multi-value. So how you will choose that? By deciding that clause is accepting how many values. Now let's see. This is done. Very simple here. Now we'll remove this. Control X. So I'll just keep this as it is. We'll copy it down so you can see the difference. So here I'm copying this here. Now here I'm removing this query from here and using at the place of Bollywood. That means, can we say that we have used the same query in the from clause? Now, what is a from clause? A from clause is a clause which always take a source or a table name. So now result of a query is also a table. So it is going to be act as a table or a source for the main query. It will act as a source or a table for the main query. Clear? So now first I'll execute this. What result we got it here? Error. But here if I execute, it is giving us the result. What error we are getting here? Select star from. Here select, we have not used anything. So we have to use something. I'm using a star. So let's execute this and we got a result as all the names. Now this name is coming from Bollywood or the result of the query. Answer is result of the query. So first this query executed and we got this result, and this result act as a table for this query. And this name is nothing but now the name is a table name for this particular result. So simple here. It's clear. I'm sure it's clear to everyone. Now let's move ahead. Let's say I'm copying this again here and I am changing this and we're using where clause. Now in the where clause, always we use it for comparison purpose. So we'll say where name equal to, instead of giving a static value, we use a subquery. In the select, we have to give something, so we'll give here star. And if I execute, we'll get an error. Because this equal to operator can compare only with one value, but this query is not returning one value. This query is returning multiple values. Very simple here. But here if I say where ID equal to 9, what will be the result now? Result will be, this will be executed first. Whatever the name will come, that will be compared with this and we'll get a record for that entire one. We got a Sanju. See the difference now. Here also, let's say I'm using the same query. Here also, let's say we are using the same query. Now, can we say all the queries are same? So there is no change in the subquery. Here also, as well as here also. So now, if I execute this, result is Sanju for 15 times. Here, Sanju for 1 time. Here, entire row of Sanju. So just understand the when position of a query change according to the clause, then result may vary. Clear here? So let's move ahead. Before going ahead, let's understand what we have learned about the subqueries. So first thing, subquery is a query under the query. Second thing, query divided into the four things: single row, multi-row subquery, single value subquery, and multi-value subquery. Clear? And where you are using the subquery, that make a big difference. Result of subquery may be the same, but if we have chosen in a different clause, result of subquery will be taken according to that particular clause. Okay, till here I am assuming that it is clear to everyone. Now after this, single row is clear, multi-row is clear, single value is clear, multi-value is clear. So simply subquery means query under the query. Mostly the subquery is used in a where clause. Now, how to decide whether my query require a subquery or not? So mostly if comparison value is given you statically, then subquery is not required. But if you want to retrieve a comparison value at a runtime, then only the subquery is required. Simple. So simply, whenever you have a subtask, then only subquery is required. If you have to perform a single task, then subquery is not required. Simple. That subtask could be for select, could be for from, could be for where clause. Clear? Okay, and let's move ahead now. Is that okay. So I hope this much is clear that the subquery select statement under embedded clause of another SQL statement. Now mainly it is divided into three broad categories: single row, multi-row, correlated. This we have divided into the more two: single value, multi-values. Simple. This we'll talk afterwards. First we are talking about this one. Now how it works. Simply, you have to understand one thing, that whenever we have a subquery, then subquery execute before the main query and only for once. एक बार subquery execute हो गई, उसका काम खत्म. Very simple. Now let's see. Can you see this, that we have subquery select employee name from employees where salary greater than, select salary from employee where employee number is this one. अब इस employee number की salary हमको नहीं पता है. That's why we have written a subquery. So now out of these two, what will execute first? This one. So this is executed and given a value. Just I have taken any rough value here, 2975. So once this executed, is query ka kaam khatam. And now the main query has become like a simple query. Select employee name from employees where salary greater than 2975. And this 2975 will be compared with all available rows in the main query. So wherever main query is going to select the records, all records will be compared with salary with 2975. And we'll get a result based on that. Let's say we got this one. We might have 20 records, but these three records are having more than 2975. Clear here? So simply can we say writing a subquery is the simplest task? Now, next thing is called the important part of subquery is, that is correlated subquery. Now, what is a correlated subquery? Now, especially correlated subquery is used whenever you want to affect row by row processing. What's the meaning of row by row processing? Just in the last example, we have seen that once we got a value 2975, that value is fixed for comparing to all the employees, correct? But we want to compare each row with a different value on a different condition. Then what to be done? That will be the problem. Yes. So what to be done there? So for that purpose, we use a correlated subquery. Now, why these subqueries are called as correlated subquery? Reason behind that is these queries are related to the main query. In the earlier case, we have seen that this query is independent. It does not have to take anything from outer query. But when this needs some value from outer query, then this query will be considered as correlated subquery. So how does the correlated subquery works? Now, difference between a simple subquery and correlated subquery is usually the rule of subquery that subquery has to execute once and pass that result to the outer query. Once it passes the result, subquery's work is over. But in correlated subquery, it executes for each available rows of outer query. It executes for each available rows of outer query. So this is a simple thing I have tried to make here so to understand better how it works. It gets the candidate row. What do you mean by the candidate row? Candidate row is a row of main query. So whenever main query's first row is there, first row will be considered as a candidate. It executes inner query using the candidate row value. What do you mean by that? Simple meaning here is that here it is asking certain value from outer query. So it take a value from the outer query and then it execute and it pass the value again to the outer query. Now third step, outer query will use that value to qualify that candidate. Now difference here is here this query has given the value. That value will be used only for comparing that candidate row, not entire rows. Once this is done, again it will go to the get candidate row. Now what will be the candidate row? The next row will be the candidate row. Next row will be the candidate, and this will continue up till the last row of outer query. Okay, now understand it. Let's understand with an example. Okay, let me remove all this now. We are talking about correlated subquery. So I'll remove this. And here I say select star from Bollywood. Okay. Now here I want all the records whose age is greater than the average age. Simple question. Retrieve all the records whose age is a greater than average age. So first thing, we cannot write an average function in a where clause. So we can write a subquery. So we can say here select star from Bollywood where age is greater. Greater than what? So simply we cannot write this. Average age. Reason is this is a aggregate function is not allowed in where clause. So we'll get an error. Perfect. But can we use a subquery here to get average age? Select average age from column. Now it's a valid query because now this subquery will find the average age. This will execute first, will give this result. And this will be compared with everyone's age. And we get a result. So we got all the records whose age is greater than 33 point something. Clear here? So this is a simple query. Simple subquery. Clear? But now, what if the question is that you have to retrieve all the records whose age is greater than their department's average age. In this table, we don't have a department, so we'll consider the gender as a department. Okay, we'll consider the gender as department. So remember listen the question carefully. Question is, you have to retrieve all the records whose age is greater than their department's average age. Now, I hope you understood the problem here. We don't want an entire average age. We want a different average age if the record is male and different average age if the record is female. Okay, so it's not a department, it's a gender, that's why we're having a 2. But if it is a department, it can be 100. If the department number is 10, so we want the average age only for the department number 10. So if Sanju is a male, Sanju's age should be compared with only male's average age. So how will you get it? So for that purpose, if I ask this question, what will you think? Take a 2 seconds and then I'll continue. Okay, so most of you have been thought about group by. I'm sure that whenever this question is asked, most of the people who have understood the group by, they think about a group by and they write a query, something like this. That is group by gender. Because they know that once the group will be created, average age will be for each group. But you are not thinking with respect to subqueries. Now, this will retrieve the 2 average age. One is 40, could be for male. One is 24, could be for female. But the problem here is we are using a greater than, which is a single value comparison operator. So we will get an error. Here, I can use one thing that's called all also. We have learned that we can use all, any, and sum for converting the single value comparison to multi-value. But now the problem here is if value match with all, then only it will be the true. That means ultimately it will check for 40. If I use any, even if a record is a male and he is greater than 24, that will be the true. So these are the problems we have for using the subqueries. So for this purpose, you can take a help of correlated subqueries. Now, what is a correlated subquery? What if I say here gender equal to M? What's the meaning of that? Inner query will retrieve only the average age for males, 40.5. So all the records will be compared with 40.5. But we don't want that, because we want female to be compared with 24 point something. What result we are getting here? 24.57. So here, this will keep on changing, because if you see the record, here it's a problem that first records male, male, then female, female, then male, male, then female. So what we can do it here? We can use the little bit alias. Okay, so Bollywood will make it here as a B1. B1 is nothing but short name given to the Bollywood. And same this Bollywood, we will use it as a B2. Now, physical, there's a one table, but now virtually there are the two tables, B1 and B2. Correct? And both the tables are exactly the identical. And here, this gender is belong to the B2. So even if I write B2 dot gender, it's a correct one. Yes. And instead of this F, I say that this should be compared with value from B1 gender. So I did B1 dot. Now, this query is not independent, because this want this value from outer query. So if I try to execute independently, I'll get an error, because this B1 is not available in this query. This B1 is available at outer query. Correct? So now this, for executing this query, outer query has to execute first. Correct? But the problem is, according to the rule of subquery, inner query has to execute first. So can we say it has become the deadlock? So whenever it is referring the outer query, the query converted into the correlated subquery. Because in this case, outer query has to execute. But if you think in deep, outer query cannot execute until it gets the value from inner query. So here, outer query will execute, but stop at the first row. Outer query will execute, but stop at the first row. And on the first row, it has stopped here. Correct? Now, inner query has a B1 because it has executed, and it will require the gender value. So what the gender value is here? M. So this M will be passed here. Now, it will retrieve the average age for M and pass to the outer query. Outer query will compare that value with this age. Now, whether this query will, that value will match with this or not, that's a secondary part. If it is matching, that record will be selected, or if it is not matching, that will be rejected. Very simple here. So once, let's say the result was a 45 point something, right? And this is a 50. So this has been selected. Once this is selected, outer query will move to the next row and stop here. Inner query will execute again, but this time it will take this value. Even though it is the same value, so we are going to get a 45, but this row or this record will be rejected because it is less than 45. Then it will go to the next. This time, this gender will become the F, and the result will be 24. So this 18 will be compared with 24, not a 45. So simple meaning of correlated is it executes for each candidate row. Now let's say if I execute this, we got a result. We got 25 also because she is a female. But in the male, you will see I hope the concept is clear about the correlated subquery. If not, let's continue here. How it works? Simply, when a query take a reference from outer query, then it considered as correlated subquery. Simple. So how we decide that it is a correlated subquery? It is taking a reference from outer query. Now here the same thing. This query will execute for each time outer query's row is processed. And we'll get a result according to that. So what's a simple summary about the correlated subquery? So correlated subqueries are useful whenever a subquery must return different result for each candidate row. So correlated subquery can be used with a select, update, or a delete statement. Okay. Is it clear to everyone? So in the next topic, we'll discuss about joins.